everybody, welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. In this video, we're going to be talking about this final war that we know is going to happen, Gog and Magog, which includes the Battle of Armageddon. But this is one of the things that has to happen, or that is going to happen, just before the second coming, when Christ comes to the Jews. And we know it has to happen at some point. Now, this video isn't necessarily to say that this is beginning, but I'm just kind of looking at the conditions in the world. I have my other channel that I do, Watch for the Signs, where I look a lot more closely at these kind of things. And just recently, I learned that there's these protests that are going on in Iran, and I think it could be significant when you couple this with what's going on in Ukraine. Okay. There's a lot to look at and a lot to think about. Okay. Now, I know a lot of people have brought that up as we talk about this last conference, how there were very interesting things said that had to do with the second coming. There was a prayer that included praying for the second coming to happen soon. Elder Bednar talked about the marriage feast and about receiving an invitation the day of the beginning of the festivities. President Nelson specifically called on us to be that people that would receive Christ when he comes. So it's led me and a lot of you to believe that we're close, that we're really close. Add on top of that, everything that we've talked about on this channel is just, it feels like it's abundantly clear. How close? I don't know. We discussed the way that conference ended with President Nelson tearing up, and some people thought maybe it's because, it's his last goodbye and he knows that this will be the last time that he addresses us as a church. Others felt that maybe he is saying goodbye to us, and some of us are going to be the ones that are going, because maybe prophetically he sees the hardships that are ahead, which undoubtedly, if that were the case, I'm sure it would include a lot of this that's going on right now. We have members in the church that are in Ukraine and are in Russia. If this does somehow escalate into World War III, well, that would be something to get teary-eyed about if you knew that that's what awaits the world and awaits the church. So, yeah, so people have pointed out, well, hold on, because we still have this war that's going to take place. And I've always been of the opinion that things can happen really quickly when it comes to prophecy. Really quickly. I don't really hold too firmly to specific time frames in the scriptures, because sometimes I think it's symbolic. Sometimes they may be literal. And again, whenever I try and interpret scripture, I look to what the prophets say, or if any general authority has spoken on it. And I haven't been able to come to any specific conclusion when it comes to these time frames, and it doesn't seem like they're very focused on it either. So whatever the case, what we're seeing here right now, it could be the beginning of that process. Okay, so let's just dive into it. We're going to be looking at Iran. We're going to be looking at Russia. We're going to be looking at the Middle East. We're going to be looking at color revolutions. We're going to be looking at Russian-Israeli relations. Just a whole lot of stuff. A lot of pieces to the puzzle, I guess you could say. So first, okay, let's look at this article here. This is from Jewish Voice, and this was put together so that you could understand basically who the main actors are in this whole Middle East drama between all these countries and Israel. Okay, so Israel's hostile neighbors. Egypt, I'm not going to read the entire thing, but it says here, on February 11th, 2011, Mubarak was forced from power. Now it is almost certain that Egypt will be much more hostile toward Israel than in the past. Of great concern is the Muslim Brotherhood. Founded in 1928, the organization's express purpose is twofold: to implement Sharia worldwide, that's the um, Muslim law, right? And reestablish the global Islamic Caliphate. Outlawed in Egypt since 1954, the Muslim Brotherhood has now emerged as a legitimate political party under a new name, the Freedom and Justice Party. Watch for growing hostility toward Israel as Egypt falls to greater influence of Muslim fanatical leadership. To be fair, I don't know when this was written, and I don't know the current state of Egypt. Whatever the case, I'm sure that these people are around. I don't know how much power they have right now in Egypt. So we got Egypt. Okay, now we have Syria, and Syria is interesting because they are still dealing with this civil war that erupted during the Arab Spring in 2011. Okay, that's been going on from that time all the way till now, and it's with the help of Russia. So that's interesting, given what's happening with Russia right now in Ukraine. Russia is helping with this civil war. They themselves are trying to take parts of Ukraine, and we're going to look at Russia's point of view. By the way, it may make sense why they're doing what they're doing. I'm not saying that it's right, but we'll get to that in a minute. So Syria is a constant danger for Israel, continuing to demand the return of the Golan Heights, which Israel captured in 1967. Syria used the high ground to launch missile attacks on Israel's communities in the valleys below. Fanatical Islam has strong roots, especially in southern Syria, near the Israeli border. Any new government might well be even more radicalized by these fanatics. This would result in a more volatile relationship with Israel than what currently exists. At least the current Assad government desires to maintain stable political ties with the West, and therefore exercises some restraint in dealing with Israel. This restraint would disappear if Syria were to fall into the hands of radicalized Muslim leadership, possibly leading to an all-out war against Israel. So, as of right now, Russia's there. They're helping him. It doesn't seem like the rebels are making much progress, but I haven't really looked into that too much, but I haven't really seen any news about it either. The one thing that's interesting, though, is the Golan Heights, okay? Because Russia, at the beginning... okay, let me see if I can find it here. Right here. So, when the Ukraine war was about to kick off, Russia was really upset at all these different countries that were condemning them, okay? And that included Israel. And I clearly remember when this happened. I made a video about it, in fact. It says, Russia takes issue with Israel's sovereignty over Golan Heights and Jerusalem. Golan Heights and Jerusalem. So if you were to let that play out, like say that things got to this point, maybe Russia would try and take the Golan Heights by force, and maybe Jerusalem. Maybe they would have an alliance, World War III, and part of the campaign is to do that. I don't know. It says Russia doesn't recognize Israel's sovereignty over Golan Heights that are part of Syria. Okay, so if we look at... Well, I'm going to pull it up on another. Let's see, Golan Heights. In case you're not aware where that's at, let's look on Google Maps. This little weird little area right here. Okay, here's Syria to the east, Israel to the west, southwest, right here. Okay, looks like it partially or maybe totally goes along the east coast, or the east part of the Sea of Galilee. Okay, so Russia did this basically in response to Israel's condemnation of Russia. Moscow took issue with Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights and Jerusalem, just prior to its attack on Ukraine. Quote, Russia doesn't recognize Israel's sovereignty over Golan Heights that are part of hashtag Syria. Its deputy ambassador, Dmitry Polyansky, told the UN Security Council, which held a debate on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on Wednesday. This was back in February. At the Security Council, Russia reminded Israel that it stands with Syria when it is militarily entrenched regarding Damascus's demand that Israel return the Golan, which the IDF captured during the defensive Six-Day War in 1967. Israel annexed. Now, this is interesting because Russia, in dealing with Israel, it's like, oh, you're not going to recognize our annexation. Well, maybe we're not going to recognize yours. So Israel annexed the Golan in 1981, but to date, the United States is the only country that recognizes that sovereignty, which I didn't know that till now. I would have figured, probably most of the world, or maybe just the West or something. Surely at least Britain, Canada. But no, just the United States. In December, the cabinet approved NIS $1 billion plan to increase Israel's population in the Golan, including through the creation of 2 new towns. So this is like another piece of that puzzle when we're talking about Syria and the fact that Russia is in Syria, and if World War III breaks out, and if there's all these different fronts, then just think back to World War II. World War II, you had the Axis powers, which was Germany, Italy, and then you had Japan over here. And unfortunately, and it is unfortunate because I served my mission there, but if Spain wasn't in a civil war, they the ones that ended up winning in that civil war were the fascists, essentially, with Franco. But because they had this civil war, they weren't able to participate really in World War II. But I guess you would say that they were more aligned with Germany, Italy, so on and so forth. So, multi-front war, right? Germany was down here doing things in Africa. Germany was going east and going west, and Japan was doing stuff over here at the same time. And it was a world war. There was stuff going on here in the Middle East. So you could see a scenario where it'd be something similar. Maybe Russia doing stuff over here, trying to retake lands that used to be part of the Soviet Union, taking them by force. Down here, supporting efforts and their allies coming together down here. Iran, maybe Iraq, Syria, maybe Egypt, maybe Jordan, with their goal, to go against Israel, and who knows what else. Okay, I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but these are things to think about. Okay, so Iran. Okay, Iran is the greatest threat Israel currently faces. This radical Shiite theocracy that has ruled the country since the revolution in 1979 is dedicated to Israel's utter destruction. Under their fanatical president, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Now this is showing its age because that's not... Okay, let's see. Iran... Who's their current... I know it's not Ahmadinejad, or... I never really got the pronunciation right. Supremely President... You have President Ibrahim Raisi. Okay. Supreme Leader. This is that, like... My understanding is that he's like a religious figure, and he's really the one that has the true power in Iran, I believe. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, you have him, Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. Okay, whatever. So, okay. Iran has been on a fast track to produce nuclear weapons while promising to, quote-unquote, wipe Israel off the map. Iran finances and trains Hamas and Hezbollah terrorists, equipping them with arms to use against Israel. the international community has done little, if anything, to take action against Iran to stop them from achieving their nuclear goals. And we're going to look into that in just a minute and see where we're at this point. It is possible Israel may be forced into a preemptive strike for her own survival and to save the Middle East from nuclear holocaust. However, acting alone, she will draw the wrath of the Arab world. It is still a disastrous scenario. And think about that. Okay, we'll talk about it in a little bit, but the nuclear agreement hasn't been brought back. Remember that Trump ended it. And I'm not looking at this at all in a political way, okay? Don't think I'm like pointing fingers. I'm just saying what happened. So that's one thing that causes me concern is I don't know how far along they are. I'll read you what I found, but it's kind of concerning as where to go? Where to go? It's kind of concerning as Iran is currently experiencing destabilization. A country that's trying to develop nuclear weapons with the purpose of destroying Israel is currently being destabilized, it would seem. Hang with me, we're going to get into it more. We're going to get into the color revolutions. We're going to get into what's actually happening there. There's some interesting analysis by the Institute for the Study of War. So, what's this say? 5 hours ago, Khamenei. That's the supreme leader. One who creates discord in the Islamic world is serving the enemy. We have responded strongly to those who, under the name of supporting the Shia, have provoked the feelings of Sunni brothers. This requires a response from everyone. Of course, some go to extremes on both sides. Okay. Whatever. All right. So, anyway, Iran is the biggest threat, and I think that's still the case right now, Iran. This part says that Jordan, right now things are kind of okay, but down here it says, we need to pray that Jordan remains stable under the leadership of their moderate king, Abdullah II. So if things change in Jordan, things could get ugly quickly. And then Turkey. It says, what we can say with certainty is that Turkey possesses a growing threat to Israel as they move closer toward Muslim domination and Sharia law. Yeah, because Turkey has kind of been doing some weird stuff as of late. And then it goes through these different terrorist organizations and whatever. I'm not really that interested in that. Okay, before we go all in with talking about Iran, first I want to point out things going on between Russia and Israel. So we just talked about this that happened February of this year with the Golan Heights and how that's, kind of a threat against Israel. Okay, we have this. Let's see, what was this again? Israel fears a nightmare scenario as the crisis with Russia escalates. This is from July 27th. Israel is convinced that Moscow's threat to close down the Jewish agency in Russia is retaliation for the Zionist state's position on the war in Ukraine. Okay, what's the Jewish agency? I had to look it up. I guess it's kind of a big deal. I'd never heard about it until now. Since 1929, the Jewish Agency for Israel has been working to secure a vibrant Jewish future. It was instrumental in founding and building the State of Israel and continues to serve as the main link between the Jewish state and Jewish communities everywhere. This global partnership has enabled it to address the Jewish people's greatest challenges in every generation. Today, the Jewish Agency connects the global Jewish family, bringing Jews to Israel and Israel to Jews by providing meaningful Israel engagement and facilitating Aliyah. Aliyah is the word for immigrating to Israel if you're Jewish. Okay. I don't need to read the rest of this, but so basically this is a group that is helping to bring the exiles, the diaspora, back to Israel. And so not only is there this threat with the Golan Heights from Russia, but Russia has also threatened to close down the Jewish Agency. Because I guess there have been a lot of Jews
that have been leaving Russia to go to Israel. One problem with that is a lot of them are in in technology, right, in the tech industry, and so Russia wants to hang on to them, but also it's just like another thing to go against Israel. There's this interesting figure right here: Jewish immigrants from Israel from Russia are increasing in number, with 19,168 people making the move since the beginning of the year, whereas the whole of 2021, the previous year, was only 7,824. So that's a pretty drastic increase. The figures show that so far this year, 48% of all Jews migrating to Israel are from Russia. So almost half of all immigrants are coming from Russia. And the date of this article, this is as of July 27th. So this is even before Russia did its call up of 300,000 additional conscripts into the military. And I had looked into that, and some people are going to Israel. So I can only assume that this number has gone even higher since Putin put that in place. That'd be something that's interesting to look into. Right here it talks about how before things were kind of okay between Israel and Russia. It says, it is understandable to be astonished at Israel-Russia relations right now. They once enjoyed an era of mutual interest and harmony, which led to great success for Jewish capitalists in Moscow, where some occupied influential positions in the Kremlin and others owned major media outlets. It also led to the largest migration of Russian Jews. This is talking about during that time of good relations, not what we were just reading about. Close to 1 million people to Israel between 1990 and 2006. That was the largest such immigration since the upheaval of the occupation of Palestine in 1948. So, just taking a side note here, it's interesting that, because the Lord can do his own work, right? And we know that the Jews are meant to, probably as many as possible, meant to return to their promised land. And that's been happening. So here is a period of time between 1990 and 2006 that there was a big migration. And now you could say that things are being hastened. That's how I think of it. We've talked about this before on the channel, how Israel was getting ready to receive Ukrainians that were fleeing the country. So there are Ukrainians that have gone to Israel as a result of this war. And now there's a bunch of Jewish people that are fleeing Russia, right? And on top of that, I'd like to see what the number is now after doing the draft of 300,000 men. It's probably increased since then. So there's been a hastening of Jews going to Israel from these places, right? 48% of all Jews going to Israel are from Russia. I would say that's probably a hastening. Many Israelis believe that they will need a miracle to get Russia to reverse the decision to close the Jewish agency. Moscow seems to be heading toward the end of Jewish migration from Russia, and orders from the highest levels have been issued in this regard. This is not a whim, but a serious initiative stemming from the Kremlin's vision of global leadership. All right, so we have the Golan Heights. We have the threat to close the Jewish agency, which the most updated thing that I could find was this, July of this year. I went to the Wikipedia page. It doesn't really have anything more update than that. This is the section here, so I think it's still open in Russia. Now, there's this other weird thing that's going on where Russia wants the ownership of this like complex, which includes, I think, a cathedral or something to that effect. I'm not going to go into all the details. I did look it up. Actually, is this the one that talks about it? Amid Ukrainian invasion, Jerusalem court nixes transfer of old city property to Russia. Okay, so okay, this is like a weird story, but maybe it's some kind of power play. Maybe it's a future, the precedent for a future invasion of Jerusalem. Like how Russia was talking about taking the Golan Heights, and well, not talking about them taking, but how they believe that Israel should give up the Golan Heights and Jerusalem. Well, Russia is saying, hey, this right here in Jerusalem, you know, that part of uh, that land that you took that we don't think you should have, we need you to give this church to us. We own that. The complex is located near the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem's Old City. So this is like in Jerusalem proper. So here it is right here. Okay. In the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, if it'll show up, it's like over here somewhere. Here it is right there. See, Church of the Holy Sepulchre right here. So what Russia wants is this area right here, which is not, it doesn't look like it's very far from the Temple Mount. I would guess it's, well, let's see how far. Let's see, Temple Mount. How long does it take you to walk there? Only 10 minutes away. It's only 10 minutes away from the Temple Mount. Walking. Okay, so in 1857, Tsar Alexander II purchased the land on which Alexander's court, also known as the Alexander Nevsky Church, was built. Okay, all the way back, way before Israel became a country in 1948, 1859, Alexander II. Okay. Until the Russian Revolution in 1917, the area was under the control of the Russian imperial government. Former Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu approved giving Alexander's court to Russia in 2020. The move was seen as a goodwill gesture following Russia's release of Nama Issachar, an Israeli woman who was imprisoned after a small quantity of marijuana was found in her backpack during a layover in Moscow. That's kind of an odd trade, but okay. The court decision comes amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Israel, which enjoys close ties with both countries, has largely refrained from condemning Moscow, apparently due to concerns Moscow could limit the IDF's ability to act against Iranian-linked targets in Syria, where Russia maintains a military presence. So what that's talking about is, if we zoom out, let's go to the political map. If we zoom out, there's a lot of attacks from right here. From this area, from I think primarily Hezbollah, and they're backed by Iran. They fire rockets into Israel, into Israeli communities over here, and I think probably into the Golan Heights. And so they do what's it called, airstrikes against targets over here. And I guess Russia, them being in Syria and have a presence there, they're not stopping that from happening, because I guess they could try and prevent it with their air force in Syria. Okay, so Russia wants that church, or wants that complex, or whatever you want to call it. They mysteriously suddenly want that at a time like this. And at the same time, the Chabad, which is a Jewish outreach organization, basically, they're upset at Russia because I guess Russia has an entire library of documents that are unique, and they're demanding that Russia give it back to the Chabad in one of their headquarters in New York. So there's this weird thing where Russia wants the church, the Jews want this library, and so it's well, how about this? How about you give us our library back, and then we'll let you have the church. So it's a weird thing, but you can see that there's these these different points of contention between Israel and Russia. Okay. Now, it's interesting because Russia. Okay, so they're over. Okay, let's go to this one because there's actually a Syria map. You can click up here. So this is what's currently happening in Syria. Da 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 da. The red area. This is under Syrian/Russian control. The yellow. There's a key up here, but the yellow is like the Kurds, and then the green is the other rebel forces and factions. So Russia is currently involved right here in this country on Israel's borders. Okay. Russia is also receiving drones, ordering drones from Iran. Okay. So there's a lot of like buddy stuff going on here. Iran, Syria, maybe even Iraq. I know that Iraq has been under Iranian influence ever since the war and since the change of government there. We're going to look at that a little bit. So you can see how what's going on in Russia right now and all this instability in all these different countries could lead to something happening here. And I think it would have to take probably World War III to break out and just like all these different campaigns, an Axis and Allies type situation where there's like these different goals by different countries and they're allied against each other, against the other, allies. Okay, so let's go ahead. So that's Russia and Israel. Okay, now let's take a look at Iran. So these protests are actually part of like a wider protest. I should have pulled this up. 2021, 2022 Iran protests. So these protests have been going on since 2021. I guess since the 15th of July, 2021. Up until now, they've primarily had to do with power blackouts and I think lack of like water shortages and things like that. Okay. But there's a new twist all of a sudden last month. Wait, August, September, October. Yeah, last month with the death of Mahsa Amini. So she has become the face of basically the people's dislike of the morality police, or in other words, they're called the guidance patrol, where they enforce religious observance. And in her case, I guess she wasn't either wearing a hijab or she wasn't wearing it properly. She was taken. It would appear that she was probably beaten and then she died while in custody. Although they claim that what happened is that she had a heart attack. So this has added to all these other grievances stretching back to the year before. And now it's like becoming very, very intense. Now, why does this matter? Why is this important? It's important, I think, because of this. Russia claims that the United States and the West have, I'll just read it here. Okay, I'll just read it. The British strategist Liddell Hart stressed the need to understand rival views of grand strategy and military developments, or the other side of the hill. Yeah, when you're fighting a war, you want to see how your enemy views the world, what their goals are, what they believe is happening. So he's playing devil's advocate here. Okay, a range of Russian and Belarusian military and civil experts presented a very different view of global security and the forces behind it at the Russian Ministry of Defense's third Moscow Conference on International Security on May 23rd, 2014. The timing of this is important because we had the Arab Spring. Let me pull this up. the Arab Spring that took place between December 2010 to December 2012. But I think most of these uprisings, revolts, protests were taking place during the spring. That's why it has that name. Where you had just like a rash, like a wildfire of just all sorts of political upheaval across all these different Arabic Muslim countries. In some cases, so look at the purple here, government overthrown more than once. So Egypt and then Yemen. Black is government overthrown up here. Civil war. We have Libya, and then we have, so the black is Tunisia, and then we have civil war in, wait, is that Algeria? Which one's Libya? I'm not sure, whatever. Here, and then Syria is still at civil war. And, here's a few other color codes. But basically, these all happened around the same time. It was really something to behold. Okay? So, Russia looks at this, and then something similar happens in Ukraine. Let's see if I have that up. Called the Revolution of Dignity. So this happened February of 2014. Okay, February 2014. Okay, the Arab Spring is now, it's been over for a couple years. Now, Ukraine, this is what happens. The Revolution of Dignity, also known as the Maidan Revolution and the Ukrainian Revolution, took place in Ukraine in February 2014 at the end of the Euromaidan protest, when deadly clashes between protesters and the security forces in Ukrainian capital Kyiv culminated in the ousting of elected President Viktor Yanukovych, the overthrow of the Ukrainian government, and the outbreak of the Russo-Ukrainian War, which is what's going on right now. Okay, so Arab Spring, a couple years later, suddenly something similar happens in Ukraine where they successfully throw out the president and change the government. Okay, after that is when, let me find one of these maps. Let's go back to Ukraine. After that is when Russia takes Crimea. You remember that. They came over here. It was like the same playbook as what they did this time. They had supposed referendums, and the supposed results of the referendums is that Crimea wanted to join Russia, and so Russia annexed Ukraine. Now, you can see why maybe they're concerned when you look at it from this point of view. And I'm not going to say they're right or if they're wrong, because I don't know. A lot of these things are kind of like happening behind the scenes, and it's not really out in the open. You can guess, you can kind of like try and put the pieces together, but okay, so color revolution. Okay, the first session of the conference presented an overview of the security situation, focusing on what Russian experts called the quote-unquote color revolution. Russian analysts have used the term since the Rose Revolution in Georgia in 2012. Interesting, because that was right after the Arab Spring. In discussing the Orange Revolution in Ukraine in 2004 and the Tulip Revolution that took place in Kyrgyzstan in 2005. The Russian military officers now tied the term color revolution to the crisis in Ukraine and to what they saw as new U.S. and European approach to warfare that focuses on creating destabilizing revolutions in other states as a means of serving their security interest at low cost and with minimal casualties. It was seen as posing a potential threat to Russia in the near abroad, to China in Asian states not aligned with the U.S., and a means of destabilizing states in the Middle East, the Arab Spring, right, Africa, Central Asia, and South Asia. The second session repeated these themes, focusing on the instability in the Middle East, and the final session addressed the war in Afghanistan and South Asia. Many of the speakers at the meeting from other countries touched on very different themes, but the Russian and Belarusian military speakers provided a consistent and carefully orchestrated picture of the quote-unquote color revolution, backed by detailed PowerPoint presentations, some of which came from the audience during what would normally have been the question period. Key Russian officers and officials presented a view of the U.S. and the West as deliberately destabilizing nations in North Africa, the Middle East, and the rest of the world for their own ends. They describe such actions as having failed and been a key source of terrorism. They see the West as rejecting partnership with the West, or in other words, the West rejecting partnership with Russia, as a threatening Russia along all of its borders with Europe. Okay. So, from the Russian point of view, what's been going on is the West, I guess you could say the United States, Canada, Europe, meaning like the European Union and or NATO, basically trying to change up all these governments and change things around. And so you had the Arab Spring, you had Georgia. We just read that a year later in Georgia that happened. And by the way, Russia took parts of Georgia, or at least, liberated them, quote unquote. And now Ukraine. And so you can see that maybe they're trying to contain this. They don't want more and more people aligned with the West right on their borders. And that was the initial issue that started the whole Ukrainian thing, because the president wanted to have closer ties to Russia, where the people wanted closer ties to the European Union. And so that's what kind of kicked things off in Ukraine in the beginning. All right, so what I'm trying to say here is, with that in mind, you see Iran and you see these protests that are suddenly, well, not suddenly, they've been happening since last year, but suddenly they take a new turn with this girl that's become the face of this revolution. Okay, let's read a few things about this. Check this out. Okay, let me see. Iran. Okay, so this is from the Institute for the Study of War. Iran Crisis Update, October 13th. I'm recording this on the 14th, by the way, but I'm going to schedule it for tomorrow, the 15th. Okay, look at this. Expanding protests could strain Iranian state security services beyond their capabilities to respond in the coming days. Anti-regime protest organizations and social media accounts have called for protest in Khuzestan province on October 14th. So that's today as I'm recording this for you, yesterday. And throughout the country on October 15th. So by the time I post this, it'll be today as you're listening. So that's going to be interesting to see. A group called the Youth of the Whole Country, which began tweeting on October 11th, has repeated these calls and stated that it seeks to overthrow the regime. Look at that. I don't know. I'm going to say that there's a chance that might actually happen. And so you can see where this is kind of dangerous, because let's get back to this. You may recall in the past that where is it? Sorry, I tried to be organized for this, but it's hard. There's so much to talk about. Okay, New York Times. This is it right here. This is back in 2012. Okay, and I think that some similar things have been done before. You might remember this right here. Do you remember Benjamin Netanyahu saying this? Like how close Iran is to completing a nuclear weapon? Okay, this is back in 2012. So we are now 10 years past this event. It says, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel told the United Nations on Thursday that Iran's capability to enrich uranium must be stopped before the next spring or early summer, arguing that by that time the country will be in a position to make a short, perhaps undetectable, sprint to manufacture its first nuclear weapon. Okay, this is 10 years ago. There's a few other things. Let's see, this is from the 13th of this month. U.S. says Iran nuclear deal is not our focus right now, which, okay, that's interesting. Okay, which is interesting if the U.S.'s plan, if it's true with the color revolutions, and if that's what's actually happening in Iran. It's like, yeah, don't worry about the nuclear deal. We've got another way of taking care of this. Anyway, I don't know. The United States on Wednesday said that reviving the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. See, now, I guess this is the official story. Benjamin Netanyahu said in 2012, oh, look how close they are. And then there were talks, and then a few years later, there was the Iran nuclear deal. So I guess officially it's like they haven't really continued or made as much progress because they were abiding by the terms of I don't know. It's all confusing to me. But let's just continue. Okay, so the United States, the deal is not our focus right now, saying Tehran had showed little interest in reviving the pact, and that Washington was concentrating on how to support Iranian protesters. Right? Can't you see how maybe that's what's happening? It's like, okay, don't worry about it. We'll just do a color revolution on you. That's all. Asked if the United States was interested in pursuing talks to revive the pact under which Iran curbed its nuclear program in return for economic sanctions relief, U.S. State Department spokesman Ned Price replied, "That's not our focus right now." This is Ned. It is very clear, and the Iranians have made very clear, that this is not a deal that they have been prepared to make. The deal certainly does not appear imminent, Price told a briefing. Nothing we've heard in recent weeks suggests that they have changed their position, and so right now our focus is on the remarkable bravery and courage that the Iranian people are exhibiting through their peaceful demonstrations, he said. All right, U.S. focused on Iran's anti-government protests. And I don't know, maybe a little more so than what we know. Our focus right now is on shining a spotlight on what they're doing and supporting them in the ways we can, he said, referring to the anti-government protests ignited by the September 16 death of 22-year-old Mahsa Amini while in the custody of Iran's morality police. I'm telling you, this is interesting timing. Okay, because you'll remember that Russia's annexation of those 4 regions, that was during conference weekend. It was finalized, I think, the Wednesday after conference. So conference was taking place right in the middle of that process. So this was just a couple weeks before. It's suspicious. You know, it just so happens that this happens at this critical time in the Ukraine-Russia war. Then U.S. President Donald Trump abandoned the nuclear deal between Iran and 6 major powers in 2018 and unilaterally reimposed economic sanctions that have hobbled Iran's economy by curbing its oil exports. A year later, Tehran reacted by gradually violating the deal's nuclear limits, reviving U.S., Israeli, and Gulf Arab fears that Iran may be seeking to obtain an atomic weapon, and in ambition, Iran denies. I honestly don't know what's true. All I can do is read what people say and try to make sense of it, knowing that probably some of it's true, some of it's not, or there's things that we just don't know that's happening behind the scenes. So I'm not going to give really any concrete interpretation. But I just wonder if maybe already they do right now. Let's look at this. Without a nuclear deal, how close is Iran to a bomb? Number one, how has Iran gotten closer to having the makings of a bomb? Okay, this is as of August 22nd of this year, so it's a couple months old. In exchange for the lifting of economic sanctions imposed because of suspicions around its nuclear program, Iran agreed that for 15 years it would not enrich uranium beyond 3.7%. The concentration of the fissile isotope uranium-235 needed for nuclear power plants. Iran also pledged to limit its enriched uranium stockpile to 300 kilograms, or 661 pounds, or about 3% of the amount it held before the deal was struck. But starting a year after the U.S. left the accord and reimposed sanctions, which denied Iran the economic benefits the deal promised, Tehran began to ramp its program back up. Iran has accumulated enough enriched uranium to construct several bombs, should its leaders choose to purify the metal to 90% level, typically used in weapons. So they at least have enough for a few bombs, and it's if they decide to enrich it, which I don't know how hard that is or how long it takes, but anyway, moreover, it has not only returned to enriching to 20%, but has for the first time gone to 60%, a level of purity the International Atomic Energy Agency says is technically indistinguishable from weapons-grade fuel. Inspectors reported in May that Iran had accumulated 43 kilograms of uranium enriched to 60%, a rise of 30% over the previous 3 months. So that makes it seem like they're close. There's more. Number 3, what else is needed for a nuclear bomb capacity? In addition to the fissile material, there's the bomb and the means of delivering it. Iran likely already has the technical know-how to produce a simple gun assembly implosion device, such as the one the U.S. dropped over Hiroshima in 1945. An Iranian pilot would have to survive an incursion into enemy territory to dispatch it, or conceivably such a device could be delivered inside a container backed aboard a ship. To strike a remote target, Iran would still need to design and build a device that was miniaturized sufficiently to ride atop a missile and could survive re-entry into the Earth's atmosphere. Estimates for how long it might need for the task range. Estimates for how long it might need for this task range from 4 months to 2 years. Okay. Iran already has ballistic missiles to deliver such a device. So it has the missiles, but it needs to know how to. They need to know how to miniaturize it so that it can be on the missiles. In that task, they're saying it could range from 4 months to 2 years. Okay. Iran already has ballistic missiles to deliver such a device. Its most powerful missile has an estimated range of as much as 5,000 kilometers, which is 3,100 miles, putting all of Europe within reach. What if there's no deal? After entering the original deal in 2015, then President Barack Obama said the alternative might have been a military conflict with major disruptions to the global economy. Israeli officials have repeatedly implied that their military will strike Iran's nuclear infrastructure if it reaches the brink of weapons capability. An alignment taking shape between China, Russia, and Iran could raise the stakes on armed intervention by potentially opening new fronts for conflict. So things are really kind of interesting right now. It's really kind of interesting. I don't know if there's at all the possibility that Iran already has a weapon ready, because if this turns into a revolution, then they probably better do something pretty quick. If they see that the writing is on the wall, then they should probably do something pretty quick. If the revolution succeeds, I would assume that the new government would probably be more aligned with the West, both because if this is a color revolution, then that would be the goal. And just, I don't know. I kind of doubt that we would see a more hostile regime after this takes place, if it takes place. But anyway, that's the situation, and that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking that things could get crazy really quick. It's already crazy that this is happening with Russia and Ukraine. The situation in Ukraine is not looking very good because Ukraine is gaining ground on Russia. Russia is losing land. They're losing gains. In Russia's mind, these 4 regions already belong to Russia because of the annexation. So they consider it Russia now. And an interesting thing that's going on right now is this oblast, which is like it's a province, this province right here of Kherson. The Russians are trying to evacuate all civilians out of the entire province, supposedly because of rocket fire for their protection. That seems kind of odd to me because it seems odd because there, as you can see, there's fighting all along this entire area. So why are they wanting civilians to leave here? And I just wonder, now this is a super speculative thing, and I think it's fine to speculate as long as you don't really act on it or take it too seriously. It's just called playing out scenarios in your head. But I've wondered if, like, what if Russia takes their people, takes the civilians out of here, and then they decide to use a nuclear bomb here on their own land as a threat to Ukraine? Because that way they won't have as much condemnation. I mean, they probably would, but if there'd be a difference between if they did a nuclear bomb over here in Ukrainian territory or here on what they claim is their annexed territory. They could be like, look, we got all the civilians out of the way. We did it responsibly. This was on our own land. So you need to take us serious. I don't know. Maybe that's just crazy. I don't know. I don't know. I just don't know why they're choosing this one province to evacuate. But anyway, as the situation seems more dire for Russia, it seems like we get closer and closer to Putin doing something drastic, such as using a nuclear bomb. Biden has said that there's probably no easy way to use a nuclear bomb for Russia without it turning into Armageddon. He actually said that. So, I just really don't know what to think. But there's a lot of instability and kind of a lot at stake. There's a lot of weird things going on, and unfortunately, it includes Israel, which, if it extends that far, then we know that that's the beginning of the end, most likely. We'll just have to keep our eyes on it and see what actually happens. But I'm going to keep my eye on these protests, see if we have a revolution in Iran, because that's going to be historic. It's going to be historic. I would assume that if they are flipped back to supporting the West in the United States, maybe they would stop selling drones to Russia. Or maybe this will just inflame the situation even more, because if Russia loses this key ally, then Russia may just be like, you know what? Okay, you want to do this, and then maybe they'll just go crazy. I don't know. And the fact of the matter is, nobody knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows. So, all right. Well, I think that's going to be it for this one. Hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to put down your thoughts in the comments below. Whatever you think, whatever scenarios you think may happen. Let's talk about it. Let's think about it. More importantly, let's just watch and see what actually happens. If you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe. Like this video if you liked it. Make sure to share it with anyone that's interested in this kind of thing. And I'll talk to you guys later.